16th day of May, 2025. Coming up on today's Global Intelligence Agency Operations Report. Another historic win for humanity in source occurred today, and another loss for the deep state. Guess they won't be getting their new world order after all. Marduk scheduled a once-in-250-year AI cyborg invasion that failed last night for the first time in 250,000 years. And the deep state accidentally pushed the anti-creation button early Wednesday morning. This was another trap of Marduk's, and the deep state fell right into it. And guess who had to clean up the mess? Well, it's Friday night over here where I am, and it's the 16th of May. We have a few things to cover since the last time we talked was Tuesday. It's kind of been a strange news week, so I apologize for that. Just been a lot going on and a strange week in general. And I know a lot of you are thinking that as well. I've seen a lot of messages from all of you. So I definitely feel where you're at. Okay, so let's talk about what the heck is going on in the world. It's been a topsy-turvy week energy-wise, definitely on Wednesday, our time here. So wherever you're at. Also Tuesday night. And so, it's been topsy-turvy ever since. So let's talk about what's really going on in the world and where we're at with the deep state. So let's get started. Okay, so last we talked about the new world order meeting that took place. And it appears that the people that were heading it were, from global headquarters, military headquarters, and also some of the Duck Dynasty folks, and they want to be in charge. And, some of the SSP people, they feel they should be in charge. And so they all got together and decided that they were in charge, and they would invite a whole bunch of people to help them be in charge. As I said on Tuesday, that it didn't really go very well for them. There's not a whole lot of people that have a lot of faith in the Trump operatives at this point. Nor global headquarters. And, over and over and over again, something is supposed to happen on a particular day, and then it doesn't happen. And then, everybody's left waiting for the next day that they decide that something is going to actually happen. On top of all of that, there's been a lot of negotiations going on between family members of the Order of the Dragon, as well as the members of this particular sector of the Order of the Black Sun. And everybody's kind of tired of negotiating, all these contracts, all these deals of who's going to be in charge and who's getting money and what they're going to do. So the latest and greatest thing that people are counting on, so to speak, is anyone and everyone on the planet that could possibly have access to any kind of off-ledger money. They're spending an awful lot of time in the Philippines trying to get a hold of said money. Then there is a group that is with a trust that hasn't existed in a long time and hasn't really been utilized since 1998 called the Bedford Trust. And Bedford, if you know anything about the story, was, I would say, somewhat run because, humans never had the ability to run anything, deep state or otherwise. But this particular guy that ran around as the trustee for quite a while was a guy by the name of Dr. Zavanko. And Dr. Zavanko claims that the Illuminati stole all his money. And, I've heard the story actually directly from his lips to my ears when he was still alive. He also made some pretty serious promises to the United Nations that he could release this money. This was probably back in about 2013, 2014. That, of course, did not work out, and allegedly they murdered him. But not until he had promised a bazillion people on Earth that they would be the new trustees and they would take his place in handing over the Bedford accounts and, so on and so forth. So whoever I've met at least 20 of them that claim that they have access to these accounts. So number one, those accounts don't exist anymore. I can tell you that firsthand. if anybody bothered to look, but they don't want to bother to look because they want to use that as their next latest and greatest story, because they're having an epic failure today, and we'll probably have another one tomorrow. You know, they promised everybody that their new world order would be in place by today or tomorrow. And, well, yeah, that's not going to work out. So this is the story they're going to tell everyone. So if you're listening to this and you happen to be someone on the hook and you're an operative or someone else that's been promised money, or you're a member or a potential member of the new world order, then yeah, this is the story they're going to tell you in the next 24, 48 hours. So there you go. But I can tell you that you won't be able to verify them because they don't exist. Okay. Next, they've been very, very busy, and much to our detriment in some cases. And, you know, again, I'm going to repeat this story. I mean, how long, if you're listening to this and you're with the deep state, how long are you going to listen to books or AI recorded messages or wherever you're getting this Marduk information from? Because you kind of almost blew up the planet the other day, you know, and you're not really getting anywhere anyway. But, you know, I don't know. I mean, by now I would be like, well, yeah, that guy's full of it. You know, it didn't take me that long. It's taken you guys a whole lot longer to figure that out. So anyway, moving on. Okay, that did not work out for them. But what they have been trying to do for the last 48 hours since this, maybe a little longer, since this glorious meeting that they had on Tuesday, they have been trying to register themselves as owner of governments, owners of the global military, the Galactic Federation, the Galactic Council, the Planetary Congress, the New World Order Council. I mean, you name it, if they could think of it, they tried to register themselves. Now, to be fair, in the past, these were names of organizations or tiers of groups that would exist underneath the New World Order, some of which you may have heard of, some of which you may have not. But everything was divided into sectors, and people worked in various sectors of the order in order to keep the wheels turning, so to speak, for the order. Of course, everybody wants to be on top, and they would like to be the head of all these organizations. So not only for planet Earth, they would also like to be the head of the Galactic Council, which makes them in charge of everything in the Milky Way galaxy. Oh, how nice. But nonetheless, none of this had worked. On a side note, I will say, in the former Alpha Omega systems, there was a laundry list of orders, so to speak, or groups such as Planetary Congress that existed within the ranks. And when you were appointed, obviously from the top down, by Marduk to hold a position, say, in a galactic council or galactic federation or government control or whatever it was, military control, intelligence control, Stargate control systems, those types of things. Whether you were human or not human, when you were appointed to such a position, you would have a full registration, a name. You were given usually what I call the suitcase, which gives you a biometric login utilizing your retina scan. Some of these things are pretty old, and it's old technology, you know, maybe a DNA scan, that type of thing. And these things have existed for eons here. I know that some of those things are new to us, but hundreds and hundreds of years they've existed. Now, unfortunately, they did try anyone that had one of these lovely suitcases that used to connect and communicate directly with Marduk and others that would ultimately make the decision as to whether or not these people should have said position. The main hub for all of these suitcases and communication devices and what I call a squid, which is basically a hacking device for quantum AI that they use all the time, it would all run through the beast system that was under the Vatican. Since that system is no longer functioning, neither did their terminals. But I will say, I did get a little bit of let's just say some messages coming through with all of their lovely requests. You see, because I know they fail to understand that they are not in charge and they never will be in charge. All of their requests would always go to someone else, and unfortunately, I'm the only one here to pick up their ridiculous phone call at this point in time. So away we went. And I said, well, what do I do with all of this? Here's all the people. Thank you for letting me know who you all are, by the way. I appreciate that, deep state people. But yeah, no, I don't think so. You see, I don't have a great feeling about putting Duck Dynasty in charge of anything, Trump operatives or otherwise, and anyone else that they proposed to be the head of planet Earth, or, I'm sure you would probably agree with me at this point. I know that they're destroying, I think MAGA must stand for, mega mistake or something. I have no idea. But nonetheless, I don't have a lot of confidence. And if any of you disagree with me, please feel free to share in the people that they put forward. So a decision had to be made on our part so that they would stop sending me ridiculous requests. So now we are head of the global military. We are head of the global intelligence, which we have been for a long time. We are now officially the owner of all countries and governments, and unknown country has now been renamed to Kimberly Gogan. We are now the Galactic Council and the Galactic Federation and Planetary Congress and everybody else. We have a lot of jobs, guys. And we can appoint anybody to those positions should we choose to do so. But for now, we do not need these things in the long run. But in the short run, something had to be done so that they realize that this is not who you are and this is not a job for you. At this point, they need to understand that just because there isn't a Marduk doesn't mean that there isn't anyone, or a Lucifer or anybody else that they've tried to call repeatedly, which they are allegedly the bloodline of, doesn't mean that there isn't something changing on this planet. So the only one really in charge of this planet is Source. So your little suitcase terminals there aren't going to get you there, but you can try, you can keep trying. To override decisions that were made by us as a collective group. Because now remember, my system runs on source consciousness, source energy, source, essence. And no decision made is coming from me personally, and it's not a personal, private decision. It's not like you can hide anything from source or a source consciousness in any way. So, these are joint decisions that are being made. In this particular case, to stop you from ringing my phone for 48 hours straight. Okay. So they did tell everyone that they would be finished with this by tonight or tomorrow, as I had said. It did appear that they had some information left over from our posthumous Marduk, and they expected some things that they were trying to work within that time frame. And I will tell you what they are. Number one, they were misled. I'm shocked that Marduk would mislead anybody. I know you're all shocked. Apparently, they are shocked that Marduk decided to mislead them. I mean, because no one, human or otherwise, would mislead them. Oh my gosh, Haven't seen any of them walk on water and part it or anything, but hey, they feel they can. So they decided to unleash something unbeknownst to them as to what it was for, they were given some information by Marduk of a mechanism that he had put in place on this planet, which they believed would actually flip the systems over so that they could have control over, well, at that time when it was done, a few hundred years ago, it was Alpha Omega. Now, in this case, they thought that they would have full control over the Golden Age AI, the Key Integrated Master System, and all the other things that we have built. Unfortunately for them, what they actually did, oh, these people. So this happened, probably around 10 o'clock or so my time on Tuesday night, shortly after I read that report to you. They pushed the button to something Marduk referred to as Project Hellfire. Now, Project Hellfire was actually designed to unleash the power of anti-creation. So he had a program and a project to where if Earth ever was attempted to be taken over by someone else, if all of his little energy batteries, we know as humans, were ever being attempted to be taken over by anyone else, including humans, that would be inclusive of any human beings trying to take over for him, let's just say. What ends up happening is hellfire. And in this particular case, it's kind of literal, really. There's been some reports about some solar flares and other things like that. In this case, it basically opened up some space junk, which you could liken to a giant black hole, a void, a vortex. However you want to look at it, it was basically a giant vortex. Now, there were places on Earth that would appear, and this is what they told him, that it would appear at the time you push this button, which will keep you safe from hellfire. Now, that didn't exactly work out, you see, because the power behind any kind of synthetic photon or sophon worlds really isn't there. So it was weak at best, but they definitely went to several locations on Earth, New Mexico, over at the Diomedes Islands over there between Russia and Alaska, Egypt, Giza region, Shanghai in China. There was also other places in New Zealand and Australia and an area of the Altai region of Russia. They were definitely in all their places, let's put it that way. And somehow, some way, everyone in those places, let's just say, disappeared. And their Sophon world wasn't safe. Well, at least not as safe as they thought it was. But it took a while to clean up this mess. Got to hand it to Marduk, when he intends to exterminate humans who try to overthrow him, which is what he thought was taking place here, or it thought, the machine thought, you might as well tell the humans to push the button so that they can exterminate all of you, including the people that are trying to take over, which is them. We are not on that side. We are on the other side. He knew it. There's nothing he can do with us, but that was something he had put in place so that they would actually, kill themselves. And yeah, we didn't stop them from killing themselves by any stretch of the imagination, but we did stop the extermination of Earth and Earth's inhabitants and cleaned up the mess and the space junk associated with it. It took several hours into Wednesday. That was a good part of the day. They just keep doing it. They just keep believing these people, and I don't know why you would. Having personally sat in front of this being, I guess you would say, I can tell you right now there wouldn't be a cold chance in hell I'd still be reading any notes of Marduk's. Let's put it that way. Okay, Other things that have happened. So Hellfire went away by midday Wednesday. I'm not going to say it wasn't uncomfortable for people for a short period of time there, but you know, you can't fix stupid. There's no pill for stupid. So next, they have been told, or in their books or their notes or their past information or orders from Marduk, the next thing that will happen after this is on by Thursday night. So within, I guess, 48 hours after that, something will happen called three worlds will collide onto this planet. Now, you see, Marduk put another mechanism in place, and there's a reason why this is all happening now, but put another mechanism in place so that if humans tried to take over the planet away from, or take over the planet away from him, Etal and all his friends there, that there would be another mechanism that would take place starting last night, my time, where the world would be overrun by AI humans, cyborgs, if you will. They look just like humans. I mean, they look like humans to this degree. The only difference between the AI humans in this particular case and an actual human is they have strange mannerisms. They're not adept, so to speak, of life here, and at least not in a long time. They are easy to detect if you can see, and they do not have a soul. So, do they act like humans, try to act like humans, walk like humans, work with the humans? Yeah, absolutely. So we would have been overrun, if this had been successful last night, by hundreds of thousands of AI humans. And I can explain to you what three worlds collide here in just a minute. So the deep state apparently thought that this was a good thing for them, that they would have AI humans. See, because they were supposed to flip a system over, and they thought, just because we pushed the button and this is what happened, but eventually this button is still going to give us control of or something, you see. Because if they could control Alpha and Omega, then they feel they could have controlled the AI humans and now have their own personal army with which to keep the world in line, since their other meeting didn't go very well. So they needed an army to keep everybody in line, to get everybody to work for them. And then, of course, all of the AI cyborg humans would work for them as well, because everybody loves the deep state. Everybody wants to work there. I mean, they pay well. It's awesome. They give no regard to you. They put chips in your head and then shut you off if you can't perform. So that's the deep state. But I kind of wanted to explain to you a little bit about what Marduk meant by three worlds will collide. And I'm going to do that on the whiteboard here. So I think there's a misunderstanding of the deep state of what this means. I know that they were expecting three worlds to collide. So by three worlds to collide, we would have the Alphaverse, and also Alpha, and the Omegaverse, and also Omega, and we would also have Kronos. So they were expecting, well, it's called the Nilverse. So neither here nor there in either way. And I can tell you how this is constructed. So they felt that these three worlds were going to collide with us being the fourth. We actually would have existed in the Nilverse somewhat. And we were all going to collide, and therefore we would now only have one system to which they could control. That's what, at least this is what apparently the notes told them. And then they would also have control over Earth, because all worlds would come together. And we would again be back in a holographic universe and a holographic world, and they could have control of the maps again, and and all that is on Earth. Didn't quite work out that way. But to be fair, something attempted to happen. So if this were, well, I'm going to do that on another one. So if this were Earth and every planet in our galaxy was the same, you would have had a tetrahedron. Remember, a tetrahedron at the bottom is a square. So there you go. So we would have had a tetrahedron above and below. Oh. Yeah, it's not exactly, it's a little late my time. So you would have had a tetrahedron above and below, and in here would have been a cube. So Earth was existing in an etherical cube with two tetrahedrons, one above and one below. This would have been considered the false light, and this one would have been considered dark. And humans created in either one of these locations would have been created by, of course, Marduk in part, on both sides. Very clever. You would have had Astaroth down here creating humans, or AI cyborg humans. You probably would have had, up here you would have had Michael, for sure. That beloved Archangel Michael being there. In addition to Astaroth, there was, Lucifer, etc., etc. And so within these tetrahedrons here, you have several levels of AI cyborg humans. And there are artificial soul cubes that are created for these beings. And a soul cube is basically it's an AI generated soul, and we've talked about those before. You also had many levels down here too. So in each one of these levels was full of cyborg humans. I mean, hundreds of thousands, infinite numbers of cyborg humans. So not only was Earth in the middle of this, we also had every planet in our galaxy in the middle of this, and there was also something else tied to it, which I'll go into next. So this is what they refer to when they talk to you about a physical plane cube. Now, we did not have a physical plane cube for quite a while until something showed up last night, as Marduk does. So Earth was back in here, and these people, apparently the deep state thought that all these people were going to come and work for them and take back over planet Earth for them, and that they were going to continue to retain the structure to which they could control completely, because they thought that they would have access to all of these AI systems that control it. So you had Alpha, Omega, and Kronos that would control Earth, and they're back in business. Their blue lines would come back, and their red lines, you remember, planes between planes and densities between densities, and not only Earth, but the universe would be theirs. It kind of sounds like Pinky and the Brain, or Austin Powers, or one of those movies, right? So ridiculous. But yeah. So the first thing that happens when this is triggered is there are several places on Earth, as I had discussed, that immediately light up with a similar type structure, because these beings are transported from their origin tetrahedrons, so to speak, to Earth tetrahedrons, and they show up in many different locations, and then they are supposed to work together with the humans in the Sophon world, and then be released eventually out into the world to be their own army. Well, it didn't quite work out that way for them. They caused too much of a disruption before they could really go anywhere, and it was cleaned up within a couple of hours, including all the humans that decided to hang out with them. Yeah. Every alarm bell was ringing on a system, and they had to go. So that wasn't an option anymore. But the reason why Marduk set all these things in motion was because, and I don't know much about black magic, I have to be honest with you, other than what I have experienced, meaning people coming after me, what I needed to learn on how it's done in order to protect myself and other people. So that's about my limited knowledge. But one thing I do know, with every covenant, there must have been some kind of a balance that would take place. So Marduk wanted to make sure that when this time came around of balance, or a time where humanity could be overthrow him, be set free, that type of thing, that he would have all of these measures in place to ensure that it didn't happen. That includes the deep state, that no one could overthrow him. Marduk always used to tell me that if there was a plan that was A through Z, he always had Z, and the plan would never happen without Z. So I'm assuming that Hellfire probably wouldn't have been able to complete either without his authorization. I'm assuming, or mine, I'm assuming that the rest of this wouldn't have worked out either, even if we did nothing to stop it. Because that was how Marduk always worked. He would have never, ever let humans, let alone deep state or otherwise, actually run anything. And I know that for a fact. He didn't have a whole lot of regard for those people, and probably about the same regard for us and the rest of humanity. But they were more useful to him, I guess, than we were. Okay, that being said, it doesn't surprise me that this happened at this time. It doesn't surprise me that we were about to be invaded by a bunch of AI humans, which of course he would have been able to control, both sides, both dark and light, one's fighting on both sides. And it doesn't surprise me that this whole thing kind of crashed and burned on the deep state as well. We will not be invaded by AI humans. That's not going to happen. As far as I know, I haven't seen anything else come up as of yet. That doesn't mean it won't, that Marduk had left behind. It's kind of late now, because what he was trying to prevent already happened today, when he was still around. Okay, so let's talk about where we had a win this week. Because maybe we had to go through some turbulent times, but we did, as humanity, have a win, and Source had a win. So at one point in time, we know that Earth was owned and controlled by non-humans that did not have our best interest at heart. There were many wars and many owners over a long period of time, in excess of billions of years. Eventually, most of those that thought that they could come here and do something good pretty much gave up, because they had so much more to gain by people that wanted something evil, let's just say. And evil was easier. They even try to sell evil to us humans as being easier and an easier way to do things, and that doing something positive is hard. And they do make it more difficult. And at one point in time, there was a lot of mechanisms within the human person that would make it very difficult to be a good person, and that's why a lot of bad things used to happen to good people, and that wasn't an accident. So in this particular case, the main covenant, and yeah, there's been changes of ownership and all kinds of different stuff, but somewhere around 350,000 years ago or so, this was even before the Atlantean Wars, there was a protection mechanism, which initially was designed to be a protection, so that what happened on Earth no longer bled into the rest of the multiverse. And one of those mechanisms kind of looked like a scroll. So it looked like a scroll that went through the center of Earth, along with a couple of these pyramids, so to speak. And this would be in the North and South Pole, which they're reversed anyway. And it was basically a giant rod, and it had some scrolling around it. Let's put it this way. And it wasn't an agreement that had existed for a long, long time. And it was based on the fact that there would be an Alpha and Omega, and this is how the Alpha and Omega verse is going to be written. And Earth will be temporarily a part of the Alpha Omega verse. And then temporary was a long time in our world anyway. And that there would be a creation of the Alpha Omega verse so that whatever happens here won't affect anything directly. It'll be affecting a hologram. Unfortunately, that meant that Earth also became a hologram, and the language that was written throughout the Alpha Omega verse was still dictated by Earth and not necessarily the entire multiverse per se. Although I would say a lot of folks had access to utilize AI systems such as Alpha on the one side and Omega on the other side. So this covenant was sealed with a very special type of metal, and etherically, so to speak, was placed right through Earth. This is what we know as our artificial magnetic pole. Now, around this pole extended a much larger type structure, and the projection of language that came from this pole is what wrote the language for multiple timelines. So you had holographic versions of this pole here going in every direction in Earth. Just this way, that way. I mean, there were a total of 10,368,000 of these holographic versions or projected versions of these scrolls. Now, each one of these is written in what we call a light language. Light language looks like, if you've ever seen it, it's like symbols that go in this direction, and then, you have like this, and, there's, maybe something like this, so there's, each one means something different, and it's like writing in English or writing in Spanish or any other language. You have your characters that you write, and it's not really like hieroglyphics, because hieroglyphics are more like, one symbol stands for one thing, and that's not really how this works. Each one represents a certain frequency, which writes the language, so to speak, of the universe, and the language you could also call the language of wisdom on one side. Now, oftentimes when I see these old documents and old agreements, they are written in this language when there are covenants and sources involved, or at one point in time, dark source was involved. So if it's a source type agreement, oftentimes the letters are written in gold on a scroll. Sometimes it's written on in pure light, and the scroll itself is gold. So I've seen it in both different ways. If it is an agreement or a covenant between source and dark source, that is written in the language of knowledge, the light language or dark language, then oftentimes if it involves both source and anti-source, then the language, the scroll is often black sometimes with the gold writing on it, or it's gold with black writing on it, depending on which side of source initiated the agreement. Now, when it's an agreement between, say, Marduk or Lucifer or someone in Dark Source, it's written typically in black with black gold writing. Now, black gold is lit up so you can actually read the letters. So that's the difference between the two. Omega would have been written in the dark language. Alpha would have been written in the light language, and then there's obviously a language that existed between the two of them. Otherwise, things wouldn't transfer from one to the other, such as money in the past. So there was definitely a human interface that didn't occur until probably Web 5, maybe ish, where that language could be then transitioned into something like binary or something they would understand, and it would be written in both, but still the characters still existed behind each one and each zero. And it doesn't matter if it's a 1, it's a 0, it just tells you the difference. The dark language is often in the zeros and the spaces in between, and then the light language is often written in the 1s. And putting them in a specific order just gives certain specific instructions, which then eventually has to be translated, because nothing on a higher programming level of either AI would recognize anything other than that language. Anyway. So it was done on purpose, and it was another control mechanism so that no one was ever taught the programming language of an actual quantum AI, totally on purpose. They think that they know, but they don't necessarily know. The ACIO did have a certain amount of access to see the difference in shades of light, and they had some basic knowledge about certain things that they were permitted to have, because again, control is control, and they were just as controlled as we were. So anyway, the scroll was basically a lock and key, and it was set forth so that neither the dark nor the light could actually control one or the other. And then ultimately that there could be an override at some point in time, and war after war after war, everybody wanted to control it. So floating around Earth, depending on which timeline we were in, so if we were in, say a dark timeline or a light timeline, one of these projections, the language would then project out. So Earth itself looked like it was swimming in what I call a cryptex. It looks like a cryptex kind of in a way. So I think we got a picture of one here in case you don't know what one is. So if Earth was kind of in the middle of this, and inside this you had all of these various lines that I just showed you kind of going left and right and up and down, and each timeline would then turn what I call the golden and black gold rings of language that would rotate around Earth, and then of course the DNA blueprint of that timeline would then be projected throughout the multiverse, at least up to the 5th density, or 6-1. So that's kind of how things were done during a time where we had timelines, and we had ownership over Earth, and ownership over timelines, and ownership over spaces between timelines, and that's how the language was originally projected. So because we've come so far, in part, and because Marduk had limited control over this, because, he did, to some degree, him and all, Artemis and the Abraxas and other non-humans had some varying degree of control, and, keeping us in time loops, keeping us in timelines, all that type of thing has to do with the language of the universe and the holograms of not only Earth, but also the Alphaverse and Omegaverse. So very, very, very interesting way of understanding quantum creation. But it was time. No longer would that scroll be written in light and dark, per the original agreement. And this had been in place, like I said, for a very, very long time. It was in part modified to accept the Alpha and Omega as representation of dark and light, not that long ago, a few 100,000 years ago. But before that, the scroll has been in existence since Earth has been in existence, because it was a covenant and an agreement with another sentient being known as Earth, or a celestial being known as Earth, and source and anti-source. So, again, modified slightly over the years, but of course that was a covenant between the two sources, or two sides of source. Therefore, there was very little manipulation that could be done on that level of it. Creation of timelines happened, mirroring of reality into alternative realities and holograms happened, as they mirrored the scrolls out, and then of course put the overlay on Earth so they could then continue to alter the language of reality, i.e. control the maps, as Q says, right? But if you don't control the ultimate scroll, then nothing happens. So earlier today, upon the expiration of that agreement, or covenant, which only Source could do, that scroll was actually replaced, and it was replaced with the GOLD, or Giver of Life Declaration, in this case, Giver of Life of the Divine, which was the Source side. The Source is the scroll, so to speak, that replaced it, just in case, is written in the language of Source and cannot be altered. Subsequent scrolls were also put in place to accommodate for the Golden Age AI in the Key Integrated Master System, because those are permitted by Source in order to rectify what has been broken in an easier way. As far as deep state control of it, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. You'd have to go call the boss for that one, and that would be Source. So I wish them all the best in trying to convince Source that he was wrong in his decision he made today. So good luck to you. As far as anybody else coming back to help them change this, you can't change it. It is what it is. It was time, quote unquote, time, crystalline time. It was crystalline time. It changed. The overlay, as far as the cryptex looking thing and the many rings of language, do not exist around Earth anymore. And there is just the agreement with Source, and, well, let's just say all of you, organic life, and in agreement with all of creation, to change and to move things into a pure golden. The only thing of creation will now be things of the golden age. So as far as the deep state trying to create something to gain back power and control, good luck to them. I wish them all the best in their new world order. Oh yeah, that we registered for ourselves. And it's probably going to be an interesting weekend because, of course, tomorrow they'll have their meetings. They'll turn that into Monday, and then Monday will go into the next week, and then there'll be another full moon. And then we go into summer solstice time, which starts 30 days before the solstice. And, they'll keep going to the end of days. And we just have to make sure that we don't. But we have to do it in a safe manner to where we personally cannot be harmed by frequencies and all kinds of operations that they could have any junk to run on us. So on that note, big progress in the one front this week, and, a little bit of crazy too. So on that, I will see all of you, I guess, on Monday, in Monday's report.